Let's talk about pregnancy and postpartum, and specifically the postpartum recovery. So I had a baby about a year ago, and I have been up to that point a very active person, and I really thought I nailed it. By this point, I've gone through my journey, I've gone through my transformation, and I understood how the body moves. I have a background in kinesiology. I lift weights. I've participated in a ton of sports, and I've gone through the full misunderstanding. I've made all of the mistakes when it comes to body movement and having the injuries. And I really felt like I know what I'm doing when it comes to my body. And that's been like a consistent theme for me prior to getting pregnant, that I was confident. I wanted to be confident going into my pregnancy, knowing that I will easily recover from giving birth based on the foundation that I've laid for the postpartum period. That was something that was always in the back of my mind. I always wanted to be fit and in shape when I got pregnant, and then I wanted to recover easily and quickly postpartum. And so when I saw advice for women who were pregnant and who were going to give birth, and like how to take a break and recover after giving birth, I never paid attention to it because I, again, felt like I know what I'm doing and I was ready. And definitely, during my pregnancy, I was definitely active doing my kettlebell workouts up until the day before giving birth. I was performing my kettlebell workouts. And people were worried, and I was like, no, I feel fine. And I really did. I felt great all throughout my pregnancy. And I think the theme is that the first time moms like myself who are active do have that sense of, I feel really good during pregnancy. That means that is going to inform how my postpartum experience is going to be. And I have heard countless women, and I am definitely included in this number, say, the way I felt during pregnancy does not actually relate to how I felt postpartum. It blows my mind now, but I definitely was in that same mindset of I'm gonna do great. And in fact, everybody around me was like, oh yeah, you're gonna be back training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in 2 weeks after you give birth. Like, everybody said that to me, and I sort of like believed it because everybody's looking at me like, oh, you're fit and you are still fit during pregnancy. You just have that belly full of baby, and then you're gonna have the baby, and then you're gonna be fine. And it's like, how is it that everybody misses the step of postpartum recovery? How is it that I missed? Like, I'm mad at myself for missing it now. I'm like, how did I miss that? How did I not know that, even though I thought I'm doing everything right? How did I not know what postpartum recovery takes? And I definitely, after giving birth, which I had a great birth experience overall, um, I did not have any major trauma or any sort of emergencies. I didn't get any medications. Like, I had a completely natural birth. Went great. And then, like, I felt great afterward as well. I mean, considering, right? Like, you still feel like you got ran over by a truck, for sure. But like, you still feel like, okay, I'm still me. I'm still together. I'm still, and I accomplished this feat of giving birth to a new human being. Oh my gosh, like, best feeling ever. I felt that. And then I was like, okay, now what? Like, I'm ready. I'm sore, I'm tired, I'm sore, but I didn't expect my recovery to go like this. I didn't expect to have so many lows postpartum. Again, even like the first week of postpartum recovery, it's like, okay, you're moving around great. And I'm like, okay, when do I get back to it? And it's like, I didn't honor the fact that this is a transformative experience. I did not go back to my beginner mindset, that I go around professing that beginner mindset is where it's at, even if you're an experienced person. I did not have the beginner mindset when it came to having my pregnancy and postpartum experience. I let that fly out of the window. I did not approach my postpartum recovery as a beginner. And I am a beginner. It was my first time. I didn't know what to expect. And instead of honoring that journey, I had expectations. I was entitled to a quick recovery. I didn't show up and I didn't ask questions and I wasn't curious. I was expecting to be fine. I was expecting to be lifting weights and doing my pull ups and doing my kettlebells like right away. I was expecting to go back to my previous routine right away. And instead, I, of course, got a rude awakening because I didn't honor the journey. I did not, I did not have an open mind when it came to postpartum recovery because I thought I'm doing everything right. So what happened was it wasn't that bad, but it certainly didn't meet the expectations that I had. Now, in retrospect, like I'm a year postpartum and I actually feel like myself and I actually am back to training like I want to train. But that journey was not linear whatsoever. And for me, particularly, I always had back issues, and my SI joints, my sacroiliac joints, like lower back joints behind the hips, are like always had mobility issues and always had some always had pain. Like I've been struggling with that for like my whole life, like over 25 years of that pain. Um, when it started was when I was a teenager. But when I was pregnant, that pain went away. In retrospect, I know it's because that those ligaments stretched out and were actually supporting my back for that period. But when I gave birth, during the birth, I definitely felt a lot of cracking in my sacrum. And so the sacrum moved in a new direction and out of place. And for the next 3 months, my sacrum, or the area around my sacrum, was completely numb. And so that numbness was an indicator that like eventually it's going, there's like nerves affected, there's overstretching, and it was just something that needs to be addressed. But honestly, I had no idea how to address it, but also all of the practitioners I went to see had no idea how to address it, aside from saying it's a time thing, which it was a time thing, right? So my sacrum went out of place, and I'm trying to do my usual things, but with my sacrum out of place, that pain is referring into my hips and into the front of my pelvis, into the pubic symphysis. And any split leg motion is excruciatingly painful. And I look like I'm a normal person, but inside I'm like on fire and everything hurts. And I still feel like I got run over by trucks 3 months later, 4 months later, 5 months after giving birth. And I'm looking around and I'm like, surely, I'm not the only one. But at the same time, I see other postpartum women and they're fine. They seem fine, right? But no one talks about it. So the more I talk about it, the more I find out no one was fine during those moments, during those months after giving birth. I have yet to talk to a woman who gave birth who was fine, after 5, 6 months after giving birth. Like their journey was never linear. No one's journey was linear. My particular one was, again, that hip joint pain, that lower back pain, and that pubic symphysis pain, and I just could not get it together. It took a lot of different approaches to finally figure out what I needed, but it was also like very incremental. And I had to go back to the beginning because I would keep trying to be a little bit too advanced. I'd get exercises from my PT and I'd be like, well, I could do a little more here. I feel pretty good, so I'm going to go to the next iteration of this exercise. Like I'm going to scale up myself. I'm not going to wait for my PT to tell. Like I'm going to walk an extra mile today. I feel sore, but I can push through. And all of these like mindset issues, right? Like that's coming back from my athletic background where I'm like, oh, I need to push through the pain and this is good for me. And that means like it's going to take me to the next level. And that's just not how it works postpartum. Like you have to honor the time and take your time and actually rest. which I don't know. I didn't know how to do. And then what it took is with all my body awareness training that I've had up until that point, um, I still had to approach my new body as a beginner and learn that body awareness over again. I had to relearn and reconnect with my body because all of a sudden, so I got used to my pregnant body for that 9 months. I had of gradually growing the belly, gradually expanding the hips. Like I learned that body, I got used to it. But when you give birth, overnight, that body's gone. And so you're no longer connected to the body you had pre-pregnancy and during pregnancy. Now it's a completely different body. But the thing is, that transformation wasn't gradual, it was overnight. So there's absolutely nothing you can do to prepare for it because all of a sudden you're completely disconnected from any of your core musculature, you're disconnected from your pelvic floor, you're disconnected from your rib cage and how your spine is aligned because it's your alignment completely changed because you no longer have the counterweight of the baby. And the ribs are still expanded and the hips are still expanded, but now you don't have the stability in your core that was provided to you by having the baby there. So there's like so many things that need to be addressed and need to be relearned. And for me particularly, the final thing that got me sort of back to normal was retraining the the muscles and the fascia of my lower back to stabilize my sacrum because my sacrum has been completely reworked, replaced, like moved around. It was constantly like shifting in a new position for months and months, giving me a ton of pain. And I had to relearn how to stabilize my lower back. And once I kind of learned that and it finally clicked, I was able to then scale up to my regular workout routine and get my strength back, get my athleticism back. And that click happened for me at 9 months postpartum. And for some, it happens earlier, and I wish that for them, but it's like I almost like pushed so hard that it prevented me from seeing what I need to do. And that was like go back to not square one, go back to before square one, go back to square zero, go back to the very beginning. Because I was like trying to train my core and trying to train my muscles, but actually I needed to like retrain how I coordinate my body and like rethink my perceived mastery of my body awareness. I needed to have a complete and total reset of how I approach movement, how I approach my body, how I feel my core. All of those things I had to start from scratch, right from scratch. Once I actually started from scratch, I was able to then reconnect with my body. So I needed a reset. Then I could go into the rebuild stage. And the rebuild stage is then slowly approaching exercises and scaling them up and building a foundation of strength. And then the final phase is returning to your regular activities, to your regular athletic pursuits, to the workouts you did pre-pregnancy. Like that was stage 3. But I needed to start from the very, very, very beginning. So reconnecting with your body postpartum is not easy, but also not talked about it at all. And every person I've spoken to about this who's had a baby has had a similar experience. Like there was something that was, a complete shift in their persona that needed to be accepted. So there's like, I'm definitely combative when it comes to certain things. And like my body changing so much, I was not willing to accept. And I was like just so ready to go back to normal. And because I over indexed on that, I actually ended up setting myself back. And like I read all of the advice of taking it easy and going back to square one or like going back to the beginning. It didn't apply to me. In my head, none of that applied to me because I was already fit. I already knew my body well. I was very like aware of my pelvic floor. I've done all the pelvic floor work before this, right? So I didn't need to like think about my breathing, think about my pelvic floor. Like I had it figured out. And with that attitude, I ended up setting myself back for several months, more than I probably had to then actually reset, rebuild, and return to the activities that I love, which was absolutely frustrating. And of course, sent me into a lot of kind of depressive thoughts and thinking, I will never come back. This will never work. This is my new reality. Like I'm, completely fractured and not kind of not a worthwhile person anymore because I've lost my sense of self, which was ultimately all about my training. So I had a lot of like identity issues because I'm no longer the person that I was in terms of like being able to train hard, being able to lift weights, all of these things. So ultimately, beginner mindset is what solved it for me. But for me to go back to the beginner mindset took a few months of kind of banging my head against the wall before I could truly reconnect with my body, before I could truly accept the transformation that is pregnancy and postpartum. And then, as an aside, I have to talk about something that's really difficult for me to talk about, which is my first pregnancy. So this was my second pregnancy. So my first pregnancy did not work out. And I was pregnant and I didn't tell anyone, and then it didn't work out. And so it was the worst time of my life. And I had no one to talk to because no one knew what happened. And I also, so that was like a huge, obviously, terrible, depressive time in my life. But also, it was something that affected my body that I didn't even recognize because I was still pregnant. And so, pregnancy, no matter how short, still affects you differently, right? So it's like your hormones are affected, your ligaments are affected, your body. I mean, my body changed. I just didn't want to look at it as a result of a pregnancy that didn't work out. It was so painful already. So for me to actually acknowledge the fact that my body changed as a result of pregnancy, but I didn't have a baby to show for it, it was just an awful, awful thing to admit. I can admit it now, but at the time, I can say it took me 6 months to go back to normal after having that experience. And I'm talking not in my mind because I'm still struggling with that, every day, but in my body, for my body to recover and to return to its kind of normal state in terms of like balancing out the hormones and kind of having that equilibrium, that sense of equilibrium that I've always felt up until that point. It took me 6 months to return to that state. And that's actually when I got pregnant a second time. So there was like a sort of a lot of ups and downs, but then they became somewhat normalized. And that's when I was able to get pregnant again. So it's just, I share that because we have to acknowledge that pregnancy is a life-changing event, no matter how it goes. And postpartum is for everyone, whether or not it results in a baby, is still this time of honoring your body, resetting to reconnect with your body, and rebuilding your body. No matter how the pregnancy went, it still affected you greatly. So that's been a revelation for me. That's something that I have not been willing to admit or talk about really. But ultimately, the transformation that is pregnancy and postpartum have to be honored. And that is what will set you up for success, to actually feel like yourself again. Feel like you have reconnected with yourself, with your body, and you're able to return to the things that you love doing. And you feel like a new person, but at the same time, you are at home with who you are, who you've become, and how you feel in this new body of yours.